high level to think about what are the things that the Book of Mormon obsesses about. The Nephite religion is a temple religion.
And that's what God's doing in the kingdom of God, the Holy of Holies, is he's beckoning for everyone to come.
The Nephites are the people who remember that God has a family.
Welcome back to the Sticky Joseph YouTube channel. The day is almost here. Dave Butler's Jackson is laughing about something that if we try to explain it, it'd be way too long.
We've tried to do this 5 times
Yeah,
already.
so
I can't stop. But
the day is almost here where Dave Butler's book, In the Language of Adam, will be released to the world. Right now, pre-orders are live. And so down in the description, you can get your pre-order. This is actually one of the bonus content videos that goes with Chapter 9 of the book.
yeah, so what's going to happen when you purchase the book, there's going to be QR codes at the end of every chapter in which you can scan and get access to over 10 hours worth of bonus content where Dave takes even deeper dives into all of these subjects that he outlines in his chapter.
And the reason we did this is because anytime that we have Dave or Mike Day on, the most common comment is, we want more. And so we were like, well, we'll give you 10 hours more. So when you get the book, you're going to get access to that as well as the audiobook. And we're super excited about this. The content of it we find to be very important and has really enhanced our understanding of the scriptures, and we hope it does the same for you. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Welcome to another episode on the Sick of Joseph YouTube channel. If you're wondering why I'm wearing these Ray-Bans right now, once you see the guests that we have here, and the fact that we started recording at 8 a.m. this morning, and right now it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, these lights are burning my corneas, so I've decided the show must go on, so let's...
And Jackson also has been falling asleep over and over and over again. It's been super rude. So this way, at least we don't know when he's asleep or awake.
Exactly.
So once again, we have Dave Butler and Mike Day in the studio. Welcome, guys.
Thank
We're
you.
Pumped to have you.
Good to be here.
It's always good to have you guys here. And this is a special episode because we are releasing information that has yet to be released to the world.
Dun, dun, dun.
Whether or not it's good information, we'll let you guys be the judge.
I think it's good.
But Dave Butler and us have partnered to publish a book that he has written called In the Language of Adam. It's a third selection of the books that he's written that are on gospel topics. And so today we are giving you guys just a little sneak peek, just a little sneak peek into some of the content of this book. And if you end up buying the book, which the link is in the description, you will find at least 10 hours more of conversations like these that are exclusive to those who have the book. So,
And that's why we've been recording for the last 8 hours. So let's get right into it. Huh?
Bam. So I've said a couple times in the course of these conversations that I have often had the experience that I look at some portion of the Book of Mormon and like I can tell there's something there, or I have a reason for knowing there's something there, but it takes me a long time. It's sort of like there's a line in the Lord of the Rings somewhere where Gandalf refers to some hobbit and says he could see through a brick wall in time.
mm-hmm.
That's what I feel like. Is I'm looking at a brick wall. I'm like, man, there's a thing here. So this is an example. Let me give you the background. So in 2012, I'd published the 2 books that I published, and then I spent 12 years thinking. In 2013, a guy named Tzavit, and you might guess from the name Tzavit that he's probably not a Utah Mormon.
No.
I was thinking maybe Roman Catholic, like
Yeah.
Irish Catholic.
I was
right?
thinking
He's Chinese,
Polynesian at
Buddhist,
first
probably.
or
Yeah,
something,
sounds
yeah.
could be.
Tzavit.
Tzavit. So he published a book called "What Really Happened in the Garden of Eden," and one of the things he does in this book, about page 89, I think, is he offers a translation of the name Eden. And he does the sort of things that you do in biblical scholarship when you're trying to suggest the meaning of a name or an unusual word. So he goes and he says, well, in Aramaic, there's this word and that word, and they have these connotations, and there's this Akkadian root, and it has these related connotations, and there's this interesting word that came into Egyptian from a language that might have been Hebrew or was related to Hebrew, the word is Adina, and it means these things. And on the basis of all of that, he says, like kind of 3 pages of analysis. He says, he suggests the name, what the name Eden means, and his suggestion is that the name Eden means bountiful.
He uses that exact word.
Yeah,
bountiful,
several times.
Yes, and he says, the Lord put a garden in a place named Bountiful. Okay, which if you're a Book of Mormon fan and you could pick the word you wanted him to conclude, it would have been bountiful. You kind of can't imagine a better one.
No.
Right? One reason, this word is so important. This name is so important. The Nephites give it to a place in the New World. On Lehi's journey, the place Nahum seems to have a name that pre-exists their arrival, but the rest of the named places that Lehi's party encounter, the Lehites give them a name, right? Valley of Lemuel, River of Laman, Shazer, Bountiful, right? So it seems like they named a place Eden. That's amazing. And by the way, it's at the end of the journey. And let me come back to that. So, but then this name is so important that they in the New World, they're like, you know what? We need a Bountiful here too. And the land Bountiful, which has a city of Bountiful in it, and I'm not sure if we know when it's founded, but it's there in 3rd Nephi because it's at the temple in Bountiful, apparently Eden, where Christ appears after in the resurrection
As king.
As king. So it's perfect, right? It's perfect. Now I have not. Somebody asked me, was it you, Mike? Someone said, "Did you reach out and tell this guy Zioni Tzavit about the Book of Mormon?" And I said, "No, I'm afraid he'll retract his definition. I don't want him to change his mind because he said something that's
He'll pull a Charles Anthony. Where did you get that?
Give that back." So that's awesome. So since now I read that in like 2014 or something, and so I've been thinking, look, there's this journey, and the journey ends in Eden. Like that can't be a coincidence. And so I've been kind of staring at that for years and looking at different pieces and thinking this and that, and it's just I know this is a journey that ends in Eden. This is a temple journey. I'm just not seeing how it fits together. And actually, it was a comment Hayden made.
Yes.
Was it in our group chat or was it
when we did our group FaceTime?
There was so much back and forth between you guys, and I just thought it was so interesting for me.
I thought you were going to get mad at me.
Yeah.
Because I kept saying, I think you're wrong. I think that you need to take this into account.
I just loved watching it as an observer, to watch how you guys would talk and beat it up and talk back and forth as to, okay, what do these places mean?
Yeah.
And Hayden would push back because you're like, I think it's this. And then Hayden would say, have you considered this option?
Yeah. This is Marine Corps training. He's tough.
Yeah.
He wouldn't give up.
I'm not going to back down.
Yeah. That was, which I'm very grateful for. So what I was trying conceptually to do, I was thinking about sort of the named places, and I was thinking, okay, so if it's a 3-room sequence, the 3rd room is Eden, the 2nd room is Nahum, the 1st room is Shazer. Somehow in here, this is, and Hayden said, dude, there's another named place. This was the basic point. There is a Valley of Lemuel, and if this scheme is going to work, it has to include the Valley of Lemuel, which is totally right. And so here's what I think. Here's the basic kind of scheme. Let me kind of lay it out, and then we can talk about it. And you guys have basically been to these places or someplace near them, so I think you've got a lot to say. Allegedly. Okay. So there are 4 places on the Lehi's party's journey through the desert that get names. Okay. The first is the Valley of Lemuel. Okay, here's the overall hypothesis. The thing I was missing is that, yes, Lehi's party journeys effectively across a temple landscape, okay? But what I was missing is that it's actually specifically the tabernacle, and that makes a difference, okay? So the first named place is the Valley of Lemuel, which has the River of Laman in it, okay? And the that corresponds to the courtyard and the tabernacle. What are some of the reasons we know that it corresponds to the courtyard of the tabernacle? Because Lehi shows up, builds an altar, and offers sacrifices. In fact, he does that 3 times, all while they're dwelling in the Valley of Lemuel. He doesn't do it thereafter.
And that happens in the courtyard of the tabernacle.
And that happens in the courtyard of the tabernacle. Okay? This is also the first room of the sequence, which means it corresponds to Matthew 5. And it turns out there's all kinds of allusions to the actions and ideas of Matthew 5 that happen while the family lives in the Valley of Lemuel, which is basically 1 Nephi 2 through 1 Nephi 15. It's like 3/4 of the book. Okay? Like what? Like the importance of keeping the law of Moses is an issue. Nephi, the encounter between Nephi and Zoram tells us that how are commandments of God accepted? With an oath, right? We have a dressing sequence. Like actually, in fact, all 7, I'm going to summarize this, not tell because it's in the book, right?
Yeah.
All 7 of the Beatitude blessings are realized in the order in which they are realized in the ordinance. Seeing the Lord, being dressed, eating a feast, being comforted, to the end. It's all in order.
Yeah.
Okay. They get married. There's a law of marriage in Matthew 5, and Lehi ensures that his sons have daughters to marry. There is, I think, in that same chapter, I think 1 Nephi 7 basically shows all of the moral instruction of Matthew 5, whereas there's the law of marriage, there's also turning the other cheek, and there's also loving your enemies, and that happens in one extended sequence. There is also a repeated discussion of the spiritual gift of faith. Nephi articulates multiple times what the spiritual gift of faith means in a covenant perspective. And right as they are leaving, the second to last thing before they leave, so it's this, then Liahona, then the out, is a statement. I think it's in 1 Nephi 16, verse 8 maybe. Nephi says, my father had fulfilled all of the commandments. Well, fulfilled may be the verb shalem, right? So we may even get like the pronunciation of the temple title shalom as they exit the first room as they should.
Yeah.
Okay, so Valley of Lemuel, it's the first place, and it's got a bunch of Matthew 5 stuff. It's got tabernacle courtyard stuff.
Okay, I want to pause real quick before we get too deep in this, because if you haven't watched the first episodes we did with Dave and Mike, then I suggest that you do that, because it's going to give you a lot of broad context.
Link below.
Link below, always. And I think one thing that's really interesting, let's talk a little bit about the idea that his journey seems to mirror the tabernacle instead of Solomon's temple and some of that. And I remember one of the first things as I was reading that, one of the first ideas that poked out at me was that the reason he went back to the tabernacle is because that which was given, which was, a step from the tabernacle, had been corrupted. And so he was going back to his roots. He was going back to the roots where all of this started and trying to go from there. And then they do build a temple like Solomon's temple
Nephi 5.
in 2 Nephi 5, right?
Yeah.
Let me just say one other thing as well. If you are also lost because of the viewpoint that Dave is taking with the scriptures, if you watch our first videos, he basically is looking at the scriptures as if Nephi was an initiate himself or a temple man, knowing an ancient temple ceremony. And he is writing as if you're laughing at me because of my glasses.
No,
I think you look great.
I think you look great.
You're smiling because you're handsome.
He's writing to people as if they are going to understand those temple theologies kind of cloak throughout the scriptures. And so the journey up until the land bountiful where they build the ship, he is also kind of looking at that through a temple lens. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's great. And this is, and I love this. So one of the things, yes, part of one, some of the background is that Lehi, we early get Lehi's dream, which shows that the temple has been corrupted. Not that the objective of the temple is wrong. The thing at the heart of the temple, the tree of life, is still pure. It gives you joy. It's desirable to make one happy. Okay, that's still the thing. And by the way, it's interesting at a high level to just say, what are some of the things that the Nephites obsess about? What are some of the things come over and over and over again in the Book of Mormon, but not so much elsewhere? Well, the Tree of Life is one of them. The Nehushtan is one of them. Adam and Eve is one of them, right?
All temple.
Yeah,
things.
all temple stuff. So part of the background is for Lehi, the temple has been seized by oppressive, greedy mockers, and so he is taking a journey, and the sort of subliminal message is, the temple's going with him, right? But it's a mobile temple. It's a tabernacle. That's absolutely and part of the journey also,
So
part
cool.
of the story also is, right, Nephi tells us in 1 Nephi 2 that he experiences the mysteries of God. But then he also shows us, and this gets to Mike's point about, hey, it's not just the images of a vision or an ordinance, it's life. We're seeing Nephi's maturation journey as a man of God. And he's doing it across the tabernacle as he journeys from the altar where his father offers sacrifice to Eden,
Yeah.
right?
That is so cool. So
Nephi went through
Yeah.
maturation.
talking the mic. Yeah.
Yeah.
He went through maturation. Is that what you're saying?
When he was 5th grade.
Yeah, when he was in 5th grade.
Well, he was probably
like,
a lot younger. 'cause
you
he
probably
was
wanna
large in
drive this
stature,
car,
He was
right?
large of
Yeah.
stature.
Yeah, he was probably the 8-year-old kid
I was
that could dunk.
exceedingly young, but large
Yeah.
of stature. I went through maturation at 8.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Here's a car, but you can't drive it until you're 16 and
Correct.
have a license." No, but let's kind of break down. Let's break down before we get into it, because I think it'll be more powerful, the symbols, if we have some sort of understanding of what the Old Testament teaches us about the tabernacle. What is the layout of the tabernacle? Then let's look at the layout of Lehi's journey and see the connections.
Yeah, so the tabernacle's a tent. It is there's a big courtyard which is made of cloth. So it's a wall of cloth, big rectangular courtyard. There are two things in the courtyard. There's an altar, and there is it's translated as a laver or laver probably. It's a wash basin. Okay.
Is it like a big basin? Like, do you get into it all the way, or is it smaller?
Do we know the dimensions of the tabernacle? And I think it's generally thought to be smaller. The reproductions I've seen are more like, I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
We'll throw a graphic. There's several.
There's tons of
animated
graphics. Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't BYU
depictions.
recently have one of these things that toured around and visited
Yeah, I
the
went to
station?
it. Sure did,
How
yeah.
big was their laver?
Not
laver?
big. Not big at all.
My memory is that it's for washing the hands and the feet of the priest before they go
Yeah,
inside.
not
Okay,
big.
cool.
So I don't think this is like one you would see on the back of 12 oxen or something. I
Yeah.
think it's a smaller thing. So the building itself is rectangular, and it has 2 rooms. So there is 3. I say building. It's a tent. There is a tent, right? There is a 3-part space here because one space is the courtyard. Okay, there isn't a porch. Is the difference between this and the Solomon's temple? Yeah,
Or the courtyard would just be the porch. Like, that's
or the
essentially-
courtyard. Which, by the way, there are scholars who think, I am inclined to think this is probably likely, that the description of the tabernacle is much closer to what the temple was actually like, and it's basically the temple being retrojected back, imagined back in time, but like as a tent. And the descriptions of the temple in Kings and Chronicles include some exaggeration to glorify the current regime.
Yeah.
Okay, I tend to believe this. I tend to think that the description in Kings and Chronicles have too many tables and lamps, besides being in the wrong place. And I also am kind of skeptical whether there was a cherub throne as described. None of that actually matters to anything we say, right?
Yeah.
So the account is that in Exodus we have 3-part space. There's the courtyard, and then there's a tent, and it has 2 rooms: the large room, which is the holy place, and then the holier place, the Holy of Holies. Okay, which correspond to the Haykal and to the Debir and Solomon's temple.
Okay.
And the furniture is described as being the same furniture. This is in the book of Exodus. It's all described twice because God says to Moses, make this stuff, and then they made the stuff. So you're described as having one lamp and a table and an incense altar, and those are all in the holy place. And then the Ark of the Covenant is in the Holy of Holies.
Okay.
Okay? So one of the interesting things about this structure and the conversation, Hayden, that you and I had is what these buildings and walls are all made out of. Okay? So I was trying, here's the thing that I was struggling with. And and as is so often the case, the thing that I could not figure out that seemed like a problem to me ultimately turned out to hold a kind of an answer and something interesting. Okay? So I was trying to figure out this room Shazer. So I was thinking, all right, there's Bountiful, and that's Eden. Like, this has to be a temple journey. Then there's Nahum, and I can figure it out. Well, I guess, what is Shazer? I don't know. I guess it's the courtyard or something I was trying to figure out. But what happens in Shazer? And one of the problems is that freaking nothing happens in Shazer.
Yeah.
Okay?
They just get there.
They just get there, and they leave again a verse later. Shazer is mentioned twice. That's it. You just pass through Shazer. And so, but then why would he name Shazer? And that seemed to be a problem. Turns out it's not a problem. Turns out it's like Nephi's very subtle point, and it's the thing that opened this up for me. Okay, and by the way, I feel like I'm setting up the general thing here, and then you guys are going to say a lot of stuff because you've been to these places.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So the word Shazar is Hebrew. You look it up in Brown Driver Briggs dictionary, and it says this is an archaic Hebrew root, but it doesn't appear in the form Shazar in the Old Testament. It appears in only one form, and it only appears in one book, and it appears 21 times in the book of Exodus, and it appears in the form Mashazar. And this is an oversimplification, but kind of like sticking the M on the front means you're turning the verb into an adjective. That's not quite right. But
so it doesn't change the meaning of the word.
It's right. It's still right. So so what is the meaning? So Shazar is to twist. In fact, I think it's like to twist in a left-hand direction or something. Okay. So what does mashzar mean? Well, mashzar is fine twined. In the book of Exodus, the adjective fine-twined appears 21 times, and it is mashzar. And it occurs every time in connection with shesh mashzar. Shesh by itself is linen or fine linen. Shesh mashzar is fine-twined linen. It appears 21 times in the book of Exodus.
To describe what?
Such an excellent question. It describes the wall around the tabernacle is made of shesh mashzar. The tabernacle itself is made of shesh mashzar. The veil is made of shesh mashzar. The clothing that Aaron and his sons make, so the ephod and there's like 3 or 4 articles, the breeks, I forget, they're all shesh mashzar. And this was the thing that here we go, the door. The door into the holy place is made of fine twined linen, shesh mashzar. So
We're crossing.
So we're crossing. This is why nothing happens there.
In Shazer, yeah.
Because we just move through.
Liminal space.
It's liminal space. Nephi just wants us to know that it's there.
Yeah, let's pull it up, actually. Let's pull up the verses where it
Verse
talks
Nephi
about
16.
I think it's 2 verses.
Yeah.
They hunt for food, that's it.
16.
It says in verse 13 of 16, it says, "And it came to pass that we did travel for the space of 4 days nearly a south-southeast direction, and we did pitch our tents again, and we did call the name of the place Shazer. And it came to pass that we did take our bows and our arrows and go forth into the wilderness to slay food for our families. And after that we had slayed food for our families, we did return again to our families in the wilderness of the place called Shazer. And we did go forth again in the wilderness following the same direction." So yeah.
That's it. They arrive, they hunt, they leave.
Pass through.
So there's if we step back, there's this larger question of like, if we look at, and I've got a little diagram in the book that sets this out, and you go, well, what is described as happening in this journey, right? Valley of Lemuel, they're there for a while, okay? A month plus, even if they're very fast camel riders.
Yeah.
Okay. Then they travel. I think it's 4 days to Shazer. They leave again right away. I think they travel. I think it says many days. To an unnamed place in the wilderness. They're there for a bit. Many days again to Nahum. They're there for a bit, and then 8 years and Bountiful, right? And so, look, you have places where nothing happens. You have places, but they get a description. Places where important things happen, but they don't get a name. You get, sometimes I'm going to let only 4 days go by, and then I'm going to tell you we hunted. And sometimes 8 years go by, I'm not going to tell you anything except that we ate raw meat, right? So, look, this is clearly not a journal, right? He's choosing
what is
episodes,
important.
incidents to tell you, and he's choosing names to give you. Okay, so there's the Valley of Lemuel. I think it's the courtyard. Shazer is the transition into the tabernacle. We have two incidents in the big room of the tabernacle, which is the broken bow incident and the death and burial of Ishmael. And then we arrive, 8 years, go right by, and we arrive in Eden, which is the Holy of Holies. And why do we call it bountiful? Because it had much fruit and because it had wild honey. And we also have there the waters. It's one of the places where Nephi mentions the Nehushtan, and just a number of markers.
And there's a ship.
And there's a ship, which is an ark,
which is filled with honey.
And things get put into it, like such as get put into the ark, right? And so that's. This is actually one of the longer chapters in the book. So despite the fact we've been talking for quite a bit, this is a very short, pithy summary.
Yeah, you're literally scratching the surface.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, let's dive in because this is going to people that haven't read the book. This is going to be for those who are reading the book right now and watching this. That we are going to rehash some stuff, but I still think it's going to be worth listening to because it will ingrain it in your soul more. But for those who haven't bought the book yet, we want to give you the meat of this chapter because hopefully it inspires you to get the book and watch the rest and read the rest. Okay, so we pass into Shazer. We pass through Shazer. Yeah, we pass through Shazer, and now we're in the second room of the tabernacle.
Yeah.
What takes place in the second room of the tabernacle that we know of, and how is that reflected in the text of the Book of Mormon? So
the tabernacle. Man, that's a big question. So the climax of the second room in the temple / tabernacle is the feast, and I believed before I got to this material that the feast was preceded. At the front end of the feast, you got clothed, and that clothing was referred to by Jacob as the robe of righteousness in 2 Nephi 9 and equated with the resurrected body. So that suggests that what we have is a death and resurrection to a feast with God. Okay? So that's what I came in here, I came into this sort of thinking about. Now, the two incidents in the second room both involve, in the second room, between Shazer and Bountiful, okay, the broken bow and the funeral at Nahum, both involve food. So they both end with not just food being provided, but food being specifically provided by the Lord, okay? That is the whole point of the Nephi hunting story. But even after Nahum, I want to say it's right at the end in verse 39 or something. It says, "And the Lord provided us food." Okay. No, I don't have notes in front of me, so I'm going to speak without the benefit of notes, and I may have to go back and correct myself. So there's only one name. The name is Nahum. We don't know for sure what that root represents in Hebrew. Now there is geographical, historical research about a tribe called the Nihim who lived in the area, and this was an actual place that is findable on maps.
Yep.
Yep. So in terms of Hebrew, that root, that there are sort of two possible roots that could underlie the name Nahum on the page in a Hebrew document. And that's because there are two different H's, okay? As there are two different T's and two different Z's and a
In
K
Hebrew.
and a Q in Hebrew, yeah. And they only have
Keep it simple.
they only have like 22 letters too. So and they reduplicate a bunch of them.
Well, when you only have consonants in your
Yeah.
alphabet, then
Yeah, it's tricky.
Dude, that Tower of Babel really jacked us up.
It really pulled a number on us. So there are two different roots that could relate to the name or that could be used to communicate this name Nahum because there are two different H's.
Okay.
So there's a verb, there's a root Naham and there's a root Naham is maybe an easy way to think about it. And between them, they bear meanings like to mourn, to comfort or be comforted, to murmur, complain, groan, and to repent. Okay? So a couple different papers back in the 80s and 90s, a paper by a guy named Goff, and then a book by Warren and Michaela Aston, both talk about the episode of Ishmael's death at Nahum, and they say, oh, look, they mourn, they complain, then they repent, and they're comforted. All of those meanings are borne out in the narrative.
So cool.
And it is super cool. And therefore, this is they're basically acting out the name Nahum, if you will, right? So it is, again, wordplay is huge for the Israelite prophets. It's huge for the Nephite prophets, which is awesome. What neither one of them says is the same roots also appear in the broken bow story. Okay, where they mourn, where they all complain, where Lehi repents, okay? So actually, it's across both those stories. Now, I understand, they might have just missed the fact that the same things were in that other story.
Yeah.
Or B, they might have felt like, if I point that out, that really undercuts my argument, which is that it happens in Nahum. It's a feature of their being in Nahum. But I actually think that the point here is that the name Nahum literally only applies to the one place. But the room is the room where they experience mourning. Why? Because they die. Because they have a confrontation with death. They murmur. They complain. They repent. They're comforted. That series of ideas applies to both stories, which are in the same room. And again, both of them end with feelings of joy as the Lord provides food.
Interesting. And the comfort one, that's a big one too, because isn't that one of the signal things that happens at the end of the second room is you meet the Lord or the Comforter?
You receive comfort in the form of the presence of the Holy Ghost. Yeah. That's I think this is what Moroni's sacrament prayers are about. He doesn't say they happened in public church.
In sacrament meetings.
He doesn't say they happened in sacrament meetings that were open to everybody. And I think there's maybe a reason to think that they didn't.
Can I share something with comfort really quick?
Yes, please do.
Really quick. So this is in LeGrand Baker and Stephen Rick's book called Who Shall Ascend to the Hill of the Lord? And this is on page 341.
Okay.
And he really talks about this. It really moved me the first time I read this. He says that the Isaiah text, he uses it in quotes, second Isaiah, so Isaiah 40 to Isaiah 55, uses this term. This section of Isaiah is commentary on the New Year festival drama. And once again, this is the ordinance. This is the liturgical drama where the king, who represents Adam, but represents us, ascends to God. It is one of the major keys in reconstructing the endowment and enthronement ceremonies and putting the psalms in their order. If this is true, then this is significant that the word comfort, as is used in 2nd Isaiah, means not a pat on your head, but the actual bringing about the cessation of mourning through an empowerment. And then he quotes a scholar named Anderson who writes, In this text, comfort describes the movement from mourning to joy. The process could also be illustrated in the Psalms of Lamentation. And then Baker and Rex write, in footnote 78, Anderson notes, Psalm 71, 20 through 21, in this text, comfort is equated with the restoration of life in being raised from the netherworld. You're brought from the underworld. Psalm 86:17 begins with a petition that God will hear the prayer and grant joy to the psalmist. The psalmist hopes to be delivered from the underworld, verse 13. On the literary and thematic unity of Isaiah, and then they start quoting Gileadi, but then he says, in the words, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The rod is a scepter, the symbol of kingship. The staff is the shepherd's crook, the symbol of priesthood. And so the words are saying essentially this: I am empowered by the symbols of priesthood and kingship. So comfort is to be brought out of the netherworld and empowered as a king. So it's more than just, you're awesome. We're talking, this is associated with kingship. This is associated with empowerment and being pulled out of darkness into light.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I just had another crazy connection here. So, and I don't think you, maybe you hit this in the book, and maybe I'm thinking that it's something that was in my head, but the waters of Mormon. Are you willing to mourn with those who mourn, or comfort those who stand in need of comfort, and stand as a witness of Christ in the last
Will
days?
you make them kings and priests?
Yes, like like right there, like, will you Nahum with those who Nahum, or Nahum with those who Nahum, right? And like he goes through that, and then stand as a witness, because you can only be a witness of the Lord once you see him, right?
Yep.
And so there's that second room where the comforter comes in.
Yep.
Interesting.
And that's Isaiah 40.
Yeah.
Isaiah 40 is, comfort ye, my people, saith your God. I mean, that's the beginning. We're talking about, that's the
Make straight the path of the Lord.
That's
right?
what the
That's
messengers
Isaiah
of
40.
light do. You empower them as kings. And how do you do it? You show them the way, you invite them, and then when they're ready, you anoint them.
Okay.
You empower them. So comfort is a loaded, at least to Baker, Ricks, these other Protestant scholars they're quoting, it's a code word in Isaiah, and it's associated with kingship.
Well, the journey from mourning to joy is exactly what is described in the episodes in the broken bow episode and the burial of Ishmael. That's exactly it. Mourning and joy as the Lord provides a feast. There is also death. So I was before choir practice, I was talking to my neighbor Jim Calder, and I talked about we were talking about the priesthood lesson I taught that day, and because I have all the fanciest callings, and because I had literally taught this as a priesthood lesson in the elders quorum, and he commented on the close connection between putting on the robe of resurrection and the feast, and he said that's really interesting. That suggests it's a funeral feast. It's your own funeral feast, and then or he went to choir. He asked me about it. I made the comment that you put on the robe first, and then he went to choir and came back and said, I think that must mean that the feast is your own funeral feast, right? That you rise from the dead, you are dressed in the robe of righteousness, and the feast is a feast of your own funeral, which I think is fantastic. But it got me thinking down a series of other texts in the Book of Mormon that are very strange that I think relate to this moment, which we get in basically the middle third. It's like chapter 17 through 36 of Alma. And it's Lamoni's wife, Ammon, and then Lamoni's father, and then Alma, all have apparently the same experience again and again and again and again. This is the part of the Book of Mormon where people faint, are taken to be dead, and then they arise from the dead over and over again, which is very strange, right? It's very strange if you think, okay, in like all of the Nephite history, there was this one moment in time when the thing God went around doing is knocking people out and then waking them up again, right?
Yeah.
Over and over. And it's strange because there are more commonalities than that. So if you read Ammon's preaching to King Lamoni, it tells us what he taught the king, before the king passed out, and it's 4 specific things. It is the creation, including the creation of Adam, specifically. It is the fall. It is the plan of redemption. It is the coming of Christ. Then Lehi makes a cry for mercy and passes out. Bam. Okay? When Aaron teaches Lamoni's father 5 chapters later, he teaches him the same exact 4 things. The creation, including the creation of Adam, the fall, the plan of redemption, and the coming of Christ. Then Ammon's father cries out for, and it's interesting. It describes first he kneels, and then it says he lies down, and he also cries for mercy, although he doesn't use the word mercy, but he cries out this lengthy call to be forgiven, and then he passes out. The queen, we don't hear that she gets the teaching, but she passes out, and when she wakes up, she cries out for mercy, and so by the way, Alma 36. This is him later telling his son Helaman, I think, chapter 36, about his conversion experience, and it involves him passing out and crying for mercy, and then being revived. Right, and when these people are unconscious, they're described as being taken for dead. When they come to, the Lamoni and his queen both seem to have seen Jesus. Lamoni says so. The queen seems to have. The father comes to and starts preaching to everyone about the Lord, implying, I think, he has seen Jesus. And Alma says specifically, he didn't just see Jesus, he saw Lehi's vision. This is where he quotes 22 words consecutively of the vision of Christ on the throne, right? The 1 and the 12 descending. So we have repeated over and over again, with not exactly perfect agreement, but substantial agreement, that there's this teaching about creation, Adam, the fall, plan of redemption, Christ. There's a cry for mercy. There's passing out. There's being taken for dead. Then there's having a vision of Jesus and being raised. Right now, once is the experience of an ecstatic person. It's a mystic, or it's someone has a one-time experience. But we see it basically 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not somebody's ecstatic experience.
There's something.
That's an ordinance, right?
Yeah.
That's an ordinance, which this is how it's chosen to be communicated to us, is it's being put this way. And we get it from the outside point of view. Lamoni, queen, father. Actually, Ammon also passes out and is taken for dead. And then we get Alma says, here's my subjective experience, right? And there are other reasons, including the use of the word joy, including the Lamanite king's explicit connection with Aaron. It's such a wonderful passage, explicit connection with the spiritual gift of hope and being born again. Okay? He's dying and being born again. And to be born again is to have hope. And hope is the spiritual gift of being confident that you can enter into. It's having the hope of eternal life. It's having a hope of the resurrection. It's having the hope of entering into the Holy of Holies and sitting down with the fathers to go no more out, right? These are all things of the second room. So I think, it was in reading about Nahum, the death of Ishmael, joy, mourning, that I made the connection with, like, oh, this is what these scenes are about. These scenes in Alma are showing us people's ritual death and rebirth with the spiritual gift of hope, having seen the Lord, because they're brought to as the Lord is descending in time for them to be clothed and come forward to the feast.
So because when we talk about a ritual death and resurrection, in today's world we're talking about baptism usually, right?
Sure.
And it's amazing how the feast of the Lord that we partake of is inextricably connected to that death and resurrection. You know what I mean? So that second room of the temple. So I just want to wrap this or put this at a 30,000-foot view so that nobody gets lost, because we've been talking about this and reading this book and getting prepared for this for weeks. And so, like, this is in our brains, but for those watching, in the tabernacle, the ancient tabernacle, there was a courtyard. That courtyard is represented by the Valley of Lemuel.
Yep.
It had an altar, which Lehi built an altar.
Yep.
It had
Water,
which you have the river of Laman.
which
right.
Lehi enunciates a poem about his one son Laman and the water,
And say where he wanted the water to flow.
and he wanted it to flow into the fountain of all righteousness,
which is coming out of the oracle or out of
Holy
the debir,
of
the Holy of
Holies.
Holies. So he's connecting the water to that
Right.
space.
Mm-hmm.
and he's making a commentary on Laman's spiritual state. Right? He's saying, look, you are out here in the courtyard. I want you to flow into the Holy of Holies, which, as far as we can tell, Laman never does.
Yeah.
Right? So there's like a tragic thing going on here.
For sure. Then they're passing through the fine twined linen of the tabernacle, which is in
door.
We're coming in the door.
Mashazar, which is where Shazer comes from.
Yep.
They pass through, and then in that second room, what happens in the tabernacle is there is a ritual death and resurrection. There is a feast with the Lord, and there is comfort given,
Yep.
which we get the feast from the Lord multiple times, actually, where the Lord actually provides them with food. And it says that specifically because they can't find food, and the Lord leads them and gives them food.
And it's connected to the round ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you listen to Don Bradley, where he's like, listen, the people that saw the text that we don't have all say things like, it worked in the temple. And it was like a symbol of Aaron's rod. Yeah, it's on page like 153 of his book.
Well, I got to reread
Yeah.
that. Okay.
There's like 3
interesting.
pages where he goes and just cites all the people that talk about it because they saw the manuscript that we don't have,
Mhm.
and it's all connected to the temple.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then you have the death and resurrection, and we make it through the second room. And all of these symbols that are found in the tabernacle and that we know of this ordinance that is also found in Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount, which you can watch those videos, all of them have shown up so far.
And by the way,
In Lehi's
it makes
journey.
those weird bits in Alma where they're passing out seem less weird. Because
Right.
I for years I would read that and go, this is just so weird. I
Joseph,
don't understand
He
it.
ran out of other plot devices.
I just
Everyone has
thought-
to keep feigning and coming back. It seems ridiculous.
I thought it was so strange.
Yep.
Yes, that makes total sense. Okay, so we make it through the second room.
Yep.
They leave Nahum. They sojourn in the wilderness for 80 years.
Yep.
Which, what are your thoughts on that? On the sojourning, on where they're passing through, why it takes so long? Like,
You guys, I think, have had allegedly direct experience with this, right? In terms of like, A, that's rough territory.
yeah,
B, I remember, and I don't know the quote. I have to go dig around my library. I think somebody wrote those little Book of Mormon updates back in the day, back when Farms was a powerhouse, suggesting that the verb sojourn might indicate a period of bondage. But all Nephi really tells us is we ate raw meat, we couldn't have fire, but our women were strong enough to feed the babies, right? Like that's it.
mm-hmm.
8 years, and then they show up in this place which they name Eden, which is got mountains. Nephi repeatedly talks to God, learns how to build an ark, preaches about the Nehushtan. There's fruit and honey, which is, anytime you see honey, you should ask yourself, this is a reference to manna, which tastes like honey.
But by the way, the word bees
Yeah.
is related to Debar. Because the word order.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's so
Devorah.
you literally. Sorry, I was reading about this.
She's the bee woman.
I was reading Aristotle. Yeah, and Aristotle was talking about the order of the bees.
How did I never
Yeah.
think of that?
And so, what's on the handle? What do we put on the handle of the Salt Lake Temple?
Yeah, bees.
The
The
beehive.
It's a symbol of the Holy of Holies, honey, and they're always going to the land of milk and honey, which is a
Yeah.
symbol of the mother and a
Uh-huh.
symbol of the ambrosia of the gods.
And the honey flavored manna is kept in the ark in the Holy of Holies.
We gotta
according to Hebrews 9:4.
rewrite this. We
Sorry,
gotta rewrite
but-
this
but
book.
Isn't that a cool?
freak.
Like, that's a pretty cool connection, right?
I
Order
can't
and-
believe it. Yes, and I cannot believe it. And never thought about the
It's
connection.
just
between
beautiful.
Devorah. Yeah, bumblebee. A bee is Deborah.
Yeah,
Is Devorah. It's Devar. That's hilarious.
it's fascinating.
So it
Yeah.
is okay. So look. So it is.
By the way, this is the
date
ultimate
beer
geeking out. I love it.
is the land of Devorah.
Literally.
right? Which, by the way, Judges 4. Okay, Judges 4. Matthew 5:1, Jesus sits down and people approach him. Judges 4, I want to say it's verse 4, Deborah sits down under a tree named Deborah, and people approach her.
Okay, I think we need to have a what's it called? A rehash of this. Now, because you guys, he says a word and you have all this back context. We were like, oh, I did this puzzle piece, and we have no idea even what puzzle you're putting together.
Okay, so
right now.
so he's what he's pointed out is that honeybee
She's a Navia.
is the name Deborah,
Sorry.
and Deborah in the book of Judges is a prophetess who sits under a tree also named Deborah, honeybee.
Okay.
And people approach her to be judges. Judges 4:4.
Yeah.
Or 4:4 to
She's
5
a
or something.
prophetess.
She under a tree on a mountain.
Yeah.
So this strengthens the idea, the connection of bees and honey with the Holy of Holies.
Yeah. Because it's orderliness. The idea that the bee is orderly, and debar, the word, is orderly. Yeah.
Now, some of this is in the book, except I did not make the connection between the name Deborah and the Debir,
And
which
bees.
is such a great.
Interesting.
It's fun.
Okay, now I'm making sense. Debir,
Yeah.
which is the final room in the temple.
Yes.
So one
and
thing
the
that suggests
Deborah.
is we ought to understand that is the place of the bee.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Which also means we ought to think really hard about the Jaredites who carry two things with them: fish and bees.
And by the way, when Joseph marries
Fish
Asenath,
and bees.
Yeah.
his
Interesting.
wife, she's the priest.
Yep.
And there's a extra biblical. I'm trying to remember the name of the extra biblical book, but he has a vision of her, and she's got bees surrounding her. Remember that?
I think it's called Joseph and
Testament
Asenath, isn't
yeah,
it?
I think Joseph and Asenath. I was reading that.
Yeah.
And I was connecting this to the Holy of Holies because this idea that she's a priestess and she's got these bees, and then I was reading Aristotle talking about the bees and the orderliness of it, and this is just how my brain works.
Yeah.
I start connecting all these things, but over and over again in the Hebrew Bible, we're going to the land of milk and honey, and that's the Holy of Holies in the Exodus narrative. We're leaving Mitzrayim, the straight places, Egypt, and we're coming to the room where there's milk and honey. That's where the Holy of Holies is. And so it's all connected. Sorry, that was just a weird nerd out, but it's
good.
like so awesome.
No,
So-
that's amazing. So I feel like I'm going to have to include a late-breaking footnote just to say something
Yeah. Let's
about this.
Yeah.
Because that's such a great connection, Mike. Holy cow.
Really cool.
So the Holy of Holies is in some sense the room of the bee.
It
And
is.
that is where the bread that tastes like honey
And what do
is
the
kept.
Jaredites do? They make sure to take bees with them.
They
There's a connection
They
there.
take the bee Deseret with them along with fish in a tank.
And then Hugh Nibley writes that Deseret is the name of, I think that's the two lands combined. Hugh Nibley has a whole thing on it. I read it. I was like,
Deseret.
no way.
Deshret,
Yeah.
means the red feminine thing. So it is a bee. It's associated with kingship. It means
Yeah.
the red land as opposed to the black land, Kemet. So the desert as opposed to the
I don't know how you
land
can
along the
remember
river.
this, but yeah. I know
Well-
that I read it, and he's like quoting it.
Yeah.
I'm probably wrong. You're the
Interesting.
one that's like, but Deborah, bro. Okay.
I mean, that, like, when I wrote that down, I was like, this means something.
It does. Can we read these verses? So, and Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth. By the way, Margaret Barker has pointed
Torches.
out that Lapidot means torches.
Torches.
And the wife of Lapidot here is Eshet Lapidot, meaning the woman of flashing lights.
Which, that's a glorious woman.
Yeah, so that might not be Mrs. Lapidot. Deborah, a prophetess, the woman of flashing lights, she judged Israel at that time, and she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah. So the tree is also named
There's
Deborah.
also a tree.
Between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim, so on a mountain, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. So
Mishpat.
in the same way, Jesus sits on the mountain and people approach him to get their judgment, Matthew 7. Judges 4 has Deborah under the tree of Deborah, the bee woman in the bee place being approached for judgment.
And she's a Navia, or a prophetess.
What does Rama mean?
Well, Ramah is the name of the Jaredites give to Hill Cumorah, isn't it? It means the high place. It's adjective
Yes.
high, feminine.
So high. So between the high place
And the house of God.
the Lord, the house of God,
Yep.
right?
And on a mountain.
That's where she sits.
I'm pretty sure that's just buh. I think it's so it could be on. Well, I guess all would be on. Yeah.
Could you show me where it says that they brought bees? The Jaredites, because
They
I'm
bought
looking-
Deseret, which being interpreted as the honeybee. Isn't that in?
Ooh, where does it say that? Because it says, and also food for their flock. It says, And it came to pass that they prepared all manner of food that they thereby might subsist upon the waters,
Mike, I have force in 10 seconds.
and also food for their flocks and herds, and whatsoever beast or animal or fowl that they should carry with them.
Try Ether 2:3.
Yeah, you're in Ether 4 right now.
Try Ether 2 verse 3.
When they start their travel.
You're in the far side of Shalom.
Is Ether 2:3 a good spot?
He's looking.
Oh, this is when they leave the tower.
Yeah, before they get to the
Okay.
sacred mountain.
And notice what they're also taking after the B, last end of the verse 3, seeds of every kind. And by the way, 2 Nephi 36, when God's in the Holy of Holies, who does he want to come? Seeds of every kind. He wants everyone to come.
And
It's
Lehi's
this is all
family,
code
seeds
speak.
of every kind leave Jerusalem when they leave.
Yeah.
When they leave Bountiful also.
And God's in a cloud in verse 4. So he's in that space.
Interesting.
So there's just these little breadcrumbs everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere. So to recap again, they leave
Sorry.
the second room.
Don't-
You guys
don't-
went off. You guys went off hard, but I like it. It's awesome.
Mike,
because
you
we didn't even
shivved
really
me with
get-
this Deborah connection.
I shivved
No,
you.
that's so wonderful. I'm
messed them up.
gonna put in a couple sentences.
So what we're
Tonight.
gonna do? They leave Nahum. So they're leaving the second room. They have to pass through a veil in the tabernacle. So between Nahum and Bountiful is the largest sand desert in the world.
Oh, interesting.
A place of absolute suffering.
Now, if you guys allegedly been, it's the Rubaiyat Khalil or something, right?
Rub al-Khalid,
The Rub al-Khalid.
which literally means the empty quarter.
Right.
Or as the Jaredites say, a place no man had ever been.
No, this is what they literally say. It says, "And it came to pass that the Lord commanded them that they should go forth into the wilderness, yea, into that quarter where there never had man been."
So
And what's it called?
which is it's called the empty quarter.
No, but
that's
say the
Arabic name.
Rubat al Khalil.
Rub al-Khalid.
Rub al Khalid.
I don't know if I'm saying it right.
I want to learn how
It's
to
Arabic,
write that.
though.
Yeah, I want to learn Arabic.
Yeah.
Well,
Arabic's
Rub
wild.
is arba. It's quarter.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh. Arba-
Al-Khalid,
means
I
four.
think literally
Yeah.
means where no man has been. So
Yeah.
it's literally that, which
That's funny.
Rub al-Khalid, Westerners didn't know that name at the time the Book of Mormon
Yeah.
came out.
How
Joseph
does he-
Smith just winged it and
Yeah.
just
And
nailed
it says, why wouldn't it have said just like, "in that wilderness that no man had ever gone"? It says, "Yea, into that quarter."
Where are you?
Dude,
What are you
in,
reading?
It says
Ether
Ether 2.
2:5.
Yeah, so Joseph Smith is either a master
with their
guesser
bees and
or
fish.
a prophet.
Rub al-Khalid.
Yeah, Rub al-Khalid. So, but essentially they're passing through, and it uses the word sojourn, which means to hang out for a little bit. And so this idea of you go to the veil, you hang out for a little bit, and then you pass through and you get to the land bountiful, which is the holy. Of
Maybe
holies,
also
right?
there's an idea of a barrier.
yes, a
there.
huge barrier.
That's so interesting.
We need to read. There's not tons in. Like if I pull up, let's see what happens. It doesn't say much between there and when they get to Bountiful. So we go to 16.
No, it's like it's the very beginning of 17 and maybe and I think it's just 17, like the
Came
first
to
3
pass,
verses or
but
something.
nearly eastward from the time forth, we did travel and wade through much affliction in the wilderness, and our women did bear children in the wilderness. And so great were the blessings of the Lord upon us that we did live upon raw meat in the wilderness. Our women did give plenty of suck for their children. They were strong, and they began to bear their journeyings without murmurings. And thus we see the commandments of God must be fulfilled. And if it so be that the children of men keep the commandments of God, he doth nourish them and strengthen them and provide means whereby they can accomplish the thing which he had commanded them. Wherefore he did provide means for us while we did sojourn in the wilderness. Okay, so right there, that sojourning and providing means, right? Like there's something that has been provided that allows you to pass through the wilderness to then Bountiful. So that's kind of interesting. So then we're in the Holy of
That
Holies.
is interesting.
What do we know about the Holy of Holies and the tabernacle? What was in there according to the Old Testament?
Well, I
the
think
Mishnah.
the Ark of the Covenant,
The
basically,
main one.
is probably basically it. So the cherub throne, if that's a real thing separate from the Ark of the Covenant, is described only in Kings and Chronicles. The Ark of the Covenant before the building of Solomon's temple is described as being the throne and as being God. God is on. Is the Yoshev HaKeruvim, is the dweller among or the dweller with the cherubim.
So I think the two conflicting accounts could be the movement away from the anthropomorphic depictions of God. So we have a throne in the time period where God is considered
The
anthropomorphic.
size of us.
And then when his name dwells there, Hashem, instead of him being there, when his name dwells there, we move more towards a less bodily shaped God. And the reason why I think that both are important is because it shows the development of the Bible. But then in John, in the book of Revelation, the throne is back in the Holy of Holies. When he sees the cube come down, there's the tree, there's the water, there's the throne.
Yeah.
So my take is I like the idea of a throne there because I think the king was enthroned there on the new year and he was anointed, and I think it's his wife doing it. That's just my take. I could be dead wrong.
Yeah.
But so I like
Psalm
that it depicts
45.
I like that it depicts both. But I believe once again in this embodied God, which Joseph sits in that tradition where Joseph Smith says, well, I saw him. Anyway, just as a side note, once again, a little short geek out moment.
Yeah.
So
in Bountiful, what do we see? How do we see these things?
Well, there's a
being connected?
mountain. God appears there. This is a place of speaking with God. Nephi speaks with God several times. They call it Bountiful because of its much fruit. This is the place where the tree with good fruit is located.
We're back to Ziones Zavit.
Yeah,
Ziones Zavit.
that's right. And also back to 1 Nephi 8 and Matthew chapter 7. It's the place of honey, so it's the place of Deborah who sits under the tree of Deborah. There is... so in the temple in Jerusalem, there is a rock, and there are waters. Parenthetical, are they actual or visionary? ? We're not sure, right? There are waters in Ezekiel 47 and Revelation 22, etc. Maybe there's actual water being piped in there from the Gihon spring or in a cistern beneath. We don't know.
Yeah.
Nephi tells us of some things that are in Bountiful that line up with this vision of the Holy of Holies. And then he also he shares a lengthy speech where he reproves his brothers, and some of the things that he doesn't describe as actually being there, he puts in the speech, such as Moses striking a rock to make water come out. So in the speech, he puts the rock
And the water.
right there. Such as this is one of the 4 places where the Nephite prophets mention the Nehushtan, which Isaiah says was above the throne, and which Matthew 7, 9-11 seems to imply was above the veil, right? So there are a bunch of things: the fruit, the honey, God, the mountain, the ark. Nephi is building a boat, which is an ark. And what is he putting into it? He's putting into it, for example, the honey, right?
Which represents what? For those who aren't familiar with the temple stuff.
Well, manna.
Manna was in the Ark of the
Manna was
Covenant?
Hebrews 9:4. According to Hebrews 9:4. Well, according to Exodus, it was kept in before the Lord, so somewhere in the temple. But Hebrews 9:4, and that's in Exodus 16 somewhere, I think, 35 maybe. Hebrews 9:4 says that it was kept in a pot inside the ark. And Nephi, sure enough, puts honey into this boat, which God tells him how to build this boat of curious workmanship.
Just as the Ark was, Moses was given directions on how to build the Ark on top of a mountain.
Correct, on top of a mountain. So Nephi shows us the things in Bountiful that belong in Eden and the Holy of Holies, and some that aren't even there he supplies by saying, I gave this speech to my brother, and puts them in the speech as a motif. So I think the killer thing is the name. This is named Eden. They hike to a place called Eden because of its much fruit, right? And we know what Eden is. Eden is the Holy of Holies. It's behind the veil with the palm trees on it and the cherubim, right? Yeah. So I think that's Nephi's journey. I think the fact that what makes you think it's a tabernacle? The fact that their journey across the desert is consistent with it being the tabernacle. B, the name Shazer, the Sheshmash Zar, marks it as being not the temple but the tabernacle, because the Sheshmash Zar is what the hanging in the door is made out of in the tabernacle. That is not referenced in the temple. I think also the fact that when Nephi refers in his Holy of Holies, Eden, Bountiful chapter to water and the rock, it's specifically from the story of the Exodus. It's not the foundation stone. It is a rock of the Exodus that he is talking about being in there, right? As if to say, look, you can still become wise. You can still enter Eden and build your house upon the rock. It's not the rock in Jerusalem, but the rock is on the Exodus with us too.
Yeah. Wow.
Which really leads into Alma, where they say we're kicked out of the building, and
Yes.
Alma says, "Hey, I have a story for you."
That's right.
Yeah.
Ooh, one other thing that I will say is on that ark, or in that ark that he builds, it's the word of God. He's carrying the brass plates with him, and which have the 10 Commandments, and
That's
so
correct.
he's the word of God also ends up in that ark.
Correct. Specifically, the law of Moses, right? So, according to the books of the Old Testament, what is in the ark? One of the things is the tablets with the law on it, right? Well, what's on the brass plates? We're told various things. The mysteries are on the brass plates, but the first thing we're told is the law of Moses, right? So the 10 Commandments are on the brass plates, and Nephi puts the brass plates into his ark that he builds along with the manna, the honey. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's all sitting there
So here's a
to
question
pick up.
Yeah, here's a question that some people might be asking that are watching this.
Okay.
So what? Answer that question, because that's a good question, and I think
so.
the
What
answer
just
is
depends,
beautiful.
but it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Because so what if you are a first timer to the Book of Mormon, then this probably isn't really where you need to start.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're sitting here going, okay, why is this in here? There's so many times I would read something and say, why did they ask that question? Like for years, I was like, why are the priests of Noah asking Abinadi to explain Isaiah? They want to kill him. What's going on there? Or for years, and it wasn't until I really met Dave, for years I would read this stuff in Alma, like, what's with all this passing out stuff? I don't have religious experiences, and then I'm like, I'm out. I'm going to take a dip.
Right.
I got slipped a roofie by the messenger, right? But when you put it in this context, it helps to explain it. So I think the so what for me is to understand on one level. I think another thing is a really good temple prep class is to read the Book of Mormon as a visionary person. So if I was a parent and I had a 16-year-old, if I could speak this language to them, maybe when they go to the temple, they're not blown away because it's actually in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
So there's a second level. There's probably 19 so whats, but those are two big ones for me.
Yeah, that's cool. What are your so what? I think we all probably have so whats we can share. Let's go around the table.
Let me throw out a couple more. So, as we said earlier, does this add meaning to the text? Yeah, it does. Because, it tells us that Lehi, being driven out of, like the Zoramite poor in Alma 33 and 34, 32 and 33, although he is no longer allowed access to the Jerusalem temple, it doesn't slow him down at all. Because wherever he goes, there is a tabernacle, right? The visionary experience is still available to him. They will not be defeated by who happens to own real estate, right? So this tells us something really huge. The temple is not really about the temple, right? The temple is much bigger than that. It's cosmic. It's also spiritual, psychological. It's in you. It's a thing you can do, whether you have access to the temple or not. It also helps us understand sort of what's going on with Nephi, right? These stories Nephi tells us are about Nephi becoming a mature, fully developed visionary man. It puts us on notice that when we read any story in the Book of Mormon, okay, the story of the Ammonites, the story of Alma's subjective personal conversion experience, right? This Lehi approaching the tree of life. We should be sensitive to the possibility that there are layers of meaning that are baked into the temple symbolism that may exist in those visions. We should be looking for it using what we understand of their temple experiences and also our own temple, right? Jackson said this. Nephi expects that his readers have had the same experience he's had. And he's writing expecting we'll be sensitive to it, and we'll go, Nephi is referring to people who were following Jesus, doing the thing they've seen Jesus do, and they're in a straight and narrow gate, asking, seeking, and knocking, and being admitted into the light. I know what he is talking about. And for a long, long time, we've just glossed over it. Are we running out of time? No. Okay. Okay, cool. I would throw out one more, and this is not something I worry about. I'll be honest. I stopped worrying about this years ago, but it's just worth saying, right? There are people who think that Joseph Smith just made this up because that's the kind of thing that you do. Right? You're a bored farmhand, and the story is just far too complex, has far too many layers of meaning. I would advise anyone who can get a copy of the Sidney Sperry manuscript found, right, or Solomon Spalding manuscript. Sidney Sperry is a different guy. Do it. Read it. It's so faith promoting because it's the dumbest, most shallow kind of Roman pseudo pirate story you can imagine. It's exactly the kind of thing somebody would write would make up as a novel. Or today, I read a lot of novels that people are hoping to get published. Yeah. Okay. That's what they sound like. The Book of Mormon is far too complex. No human being alive, as a work of just sustained imaginative fiction, made up the Book of Mormon in the year 1829, or could do it today.
It's too much depth. Jackson, what's your so what? Why do you think this is?
I'm gonna take my glasses off. Hopefully my corneas don't melt. When I think about the two main things that came about from the restoration, I think about the Book of Mormon and the temple. For me, those are the big two. And for almost my whole life until I came across this stuff from Dave, I always thought those things were, related in a way, but kind of just separate things. And I have heard sad stories of people who have, like, without naming names, I'll share an experience of a young girl that I heard went through the temple, and her mom, before she went through, said, hey, after you go through the veil into the celestial room, it's okay if you go into the corner and cry because it's so weird. Like, that just makes my heart so sad that such a lack of understanding is not only being had by someone who is a member of the church, but then being passed on to someone in preparation for such a sacred ordinance. You know what I'm saying? And so when we really look into the ancient nature of the temple endowment and see the hints of it all throughout the scriptures, Old Testament, New Testament, and the Book of Mormon, it no longer becomes this vague thing that's like, okay, I feel this is right, but I'll just accept I'll never understand it. And at the beginning of the endowment, it says, the endowment was received by revelation and is best understood by revelation. And receiving revelation takes a lot of effort, at least in my life, in my experience. It has been through heavy study and heavy prayer, seeking out answers. It's nothing that's fallen into my lap. And so I'm so grateful that there's people like Mike and Dave that have been able to take apart the scriptures in such a way that makes it accessible for people that are maybe a little bit more novice into, ancient Hebrew, the meaning of different words, and how temple theology is cloaked all throughout scripture. It makes temple worship so much more meaningful for me. And for people that kind of look at their temple experience as something as kind of maybe uncomfortable, maybe consider the idea that you haven't been able to, you haven't made the efforts necessary to find this temple theology all throughout scriptures to back it up with the knowledge necessary for an incredible revelatory experience as you go into the Lord's house.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think my so what is this.
Back on
throughout most of human history, go back to sleep.
No, go back to being cool and charismatic.
So I think throughout most of human history, men and women have been illiterate. They haven't been able to read and write. And so how were important things passed, important ideas passed to these people who were illiterate if you weren't able to give them scriptures or a book? It was given to them through ordinances, through rites of passage that were done either, over and over again or one time.
Or drama.
And like the things that we are seeing in here, the things that we do in the temple are older than Scripture. So these scriptures, when you look at the scriptures this way, you're able to see not just them, but through them into the depth of who we are as human beings, who we are as sons and daughters of God. And to me, the reason this is so important is because the world right now is doing so good at distracting us from those things that are of most importance. One thing that I love, and I was talking to one of our first sergeants who's in the Marine Corps with us. He left Christianity and became Jewish. He converted to Judaism. And I asked him why. He's like, well, because I was sick of just being a part of a pagan religion. I wanted to be a part of something that was serious. And I was like, whoa, what do you mean? And he's like, the two main holidays that you guys have been hijacked by paganism. You don't have any serious religious holidays. And I was like, holy crap. It's like, yeah, Christmas. You call that a religious holiday? It's not such a religious holiday anymore. Easter, it's not such a religious holiday anymore, often. Judaism, he has multiple weeks a year where he has full religious holidays, that there isn't any distractions of, he doesn't have to ask what the true meaning of Hanukkah is. You know what I mean? But we have to focus on what the true meaning of Christmas is, because we have watered down something that is sacred. And so one thing that I recognize and I respect greatly in our Jewish brothers and sisters, those who are practicing, is they have an intense desire to do the things of God. Now, I've been to the Wailing Wall twice in my life. And like when you see them there praying, some people might be like, "Ooh, this is a weird cultish thing." What I see is a hungry desire to know God. And we are losing that. We are losing it in Christianity. We are losing it in the church, because the world and secularism is taking our ability to be able to see the mysteries of God as they are. So that's why I think this is important. That's why that's my so what to this.
Amen.
I just have to say this. I've never met the man, but I love him, and his name is LeGrand Baker, and he fundamentally changed how I read the Book of Mormon, and one day I hope to meet him. And in one of his books, he said, there's really 3 keys to approaching holiness and to understanding, for him, the Bible. He says if you want to understand the Bible, you have to have the Book of Mormon. And he doesn't use this phrase, but I've kind of hijacked his words and kind of made them my own. It's the lens by which I read the Old Testament. You've heard me say that. The lens is the Book of Mormon. And the 3rd key is the temple. The temple adds a dimension to both the New and Old Testament and the Book of Mormon. And those 3 together help me to understand God a little bit better. And so I just think that's important. And I guess it's hard for me to really quantify so what. Sometimes I'll be sitting in my office and I'll be reading something and like, Deborah, bees, the Holy of Holies. And one of my coworkers will come up to me and say, what are you reading? And I try to explain it. And they look at me like, you are so weird. And they've even asked me before, so what? And sometimes I have a hard time really explaining so what, because especially in our culture, we want it now and we want it in 15 seconds. And if you can't tell me in 15 seconds, I'm out of here. And I just think, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but Joseph said something about the things of God are of deep import, and time and reflection are the only ways to unpack them. And so sometimes I think it's okay to say, I can't explain it, but it matters.
Exactly. And I think the way, like what you're just describing, I had a vision come to my head of doing a 1,000-piece puzzle, and you put one puzzle piece in there, and you're like freaking out because you know what the big picture is going to be.
Yeah.
And someone comes up and is like, it's just one puzzle piece.
Yeah.
You're like, I know, but do you know what puzzle this is too?
Yeah.
It's to a really awesome puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. And I hope all of you guys continue to do the same. You continue to piece everything together. And any last thoughts before we wrap up?
If you haven't watched the other episodes that we've done with Mike and Dave, like it really helps bring a lot more context to the connections between the temple and the scriptures, and so I'd highly recommend. This was just kind of an added piece to that 1,000-piece puzzle that Hayden was talking about.
We're discussing chapter 9 of a book.
Yeah. Read the book and mark it.
Read the book. Also, one thing I'll just say too, like about Revelation, and reading and doing the spiritual work necessary. Like when I think about Enos, right? Enos says he was praying all day. He was basically, wrestling with God. And I don't imagine him having like an iPhone in his back pocket, like getting a notification every 30 seconds and then him checking on it and then going back and wrestling with God. Like we have to reframe how we get information, right? And it's not just ask Siri, but it's read, ponder, and pray. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not easy. These things, the mysteries of God, the most important things that we can get are not going to come from simple Google searches. It's going to come from ours. We appreciate you taking the hours to do this. And for those watching, we love you. Please comment, share, and buy the book because there's a lot more in there. And until next time, stay curious and hungry.